One of the great luxuries that a franchise like Terminator allows you is you can simply just cast the best actor for the role. So we have a massive international cast. Kyle Reese and John Connor are both from Australia. Sarah's from the UK. Dio's actually from Africa. J.K. Simmons will walk around saying he's the lone American in the movie. If one of those guys happened to be American, they still would have gotten the job, but it just wasn't who the best person for the role was.
The whole cast has been easy. It's we all get on, and a lot of that is, back to Arnold. We've got a guy there that, we're all here because of. Terminator worked largely because of Jim Cameron and his story, but Arnold was just it was just brilliant casting.
You can't do a Terminator without Arnold. You just can't. He's the first thing that comes to your mind when you think of all of the movies.
There's that poster of him with the gun, and to me, it's so iconic, and he became such an icon in the part. So, I think we're very lucky to have him as part of our story.
The first time I met Arnold, we were doing a table read with most of the cast and all the producers, the big giant square table, and we're chatting and getting to know each other. Arnold came in and sat down. Obviously, he's a big guy physically, but he walks into a room and he just brings a presence and a charisma with him that's undeniable.
Old, but not obsolete.
It was pretty special for me at the table read when we were hearing the script out loud for the first time, and he said some very famous words.
I'll be back.
That was one of those moments where it was just like, shit, yep, there it is. There they are. Perhaps three of the most, iconic words in cinematic history.
I mean, I had to get him the other day to do Sarah Connor, because, just the way he does it, it's just so funny.
I'm back. To me, Terminator has been an extremely important franchise because I remember when I did the first Terminator, it was really the first action movie where I didn't have to take off my clothes. I mean, I did take it off just for a few minutes, but the rest of the movie was with clothes. It was like with my leather pants on, or jeans, or leather jacket and t-shirt and all this, and the body was not the most important thing because the machine actually was the most important thing. So to me, this was an important breakthrough in my career because everyone thought that I can only do Hercules movies or to do Conan type of movies, where you need a little lion cloth and flex your muscles, and that was it. So here was the first movie where I, kind of did the movie all the way through with clothes on, and where it was acting, and where I was not only playing a hero like I did in the past, but I played a villain. But a villain that was kind of heroic, so it was kind of a mishmash of different things. It was really terrific and a great breakthrough for my career. After that came Commando and Red Heat and Predator and True Lies and all of those kind of things. The rest, of course, is history.
One of the first people we cast, besides Arnold, was Emilia as Sarah. And the nice thing for me was I had a history with her in Game of Thrones. When I came to the project, Skydance was already very excited about her in the role.
Look, everybody in our world is a Game of Thrones fan. So saying, hey, what about Emilia Clarke? It wasn't much of a stretch.
And action?
Look, it's obvious. She's beautiful, but she's also a badass. And that's an interesting but also difficult combination to find in an actress.
How is he?
Still breathing.
Good. And you should be able to mate with Kyle Reese in this timeline.
Oh, okay, we're not having this conversation again.
We had to run a casting process as you always do, and it was really, really simple. She came in and read, and everybody looked at it and was like, that's it, that's Sarah. Her dedication to this role, the emotional depths, the charm, the humor, but also just the incredible strength. It makes her a very different Sarah Connor than we've seen, but she's absolutely fantastic in this movie.
My brother made me watch, made me watch Terminator far too young. I just kind of fell in love with it, and it was always something that I wasn't meant to watch, so there was this kind of excitement surrounding it. Like, you're not gonna say no to Sarah Connor. You know what I mean? You're just not. She's such an incredible icon for women everywhere, and just an opportunity to play such a fierce, strong warrior and put a new spin on it like we have was just incredible and incredibly exciting.
I didn't know she's that famous when I first met her, but a lot of my Korean friends text me from Korea, please take some picture with her. So I didn't ask her yet, but today I finally asked her and she said, yeah.
And then we set about trying to find Kyle Reese, and chemistry was a huge part of it.
I think there was a temptation to go out and find a Michael Biehn and say, let's do that again. Because it was like Linda Hamilton, he so nailed what he had to do in the first movie. But after a while, as you work on the material, this is a different take on the character. We're exploring different things, and we then just set out to find the best guy for the role.
I had the privilege of working with Jai a couple years ago on Jack Reacher, which is a movie we did with Tom Cruise, where he played a very different character. He played the villain of the film.
This is insane. All of it. This is not the mission.
Yeah, well,
We really actually ran a completely open casting process. Jai came in, and we actually questioned a little bit, does he have the range to play such a drastically different character? And he came in and tested with Amelia, and I remember me and Dana and Alan, we all looked at ourselves and went, that's Kyle. Just, he was simply the best actor for the job.
You die, all right?
What?
You die, that's what happens.
I went back and watched the first two films, definitely, more of just for a reference point, but I didn't place an enormous amount of emphasis on trying to draw from the performance of Michael Biehn or anything like that. It was just, he's the character, that's great, let's enjoy the narrative. Sarah. It's just fun to kind of look back and think of what the mission was when we saw it once upon a time. And so with shifting that, it's interesting to kind of just play a different side of it.
The main reason I decided to do this movie was because my 12-year-old daughter is in love with Jai Courtney. And I said, okay, I'll go work with him. You can come to the set if you want. Jai did a little birthday video for her 13th birthday saying hi to her. So she will be, that's next week that I will get to play that for her. I will be Mr. Super Dad. Yeah, that'll be big.
We fight for those that have died. We fight for those who will die tonight.
John Connor, we knew, was going to be one of the hardest roles to cast because he has to be charismatic. He has to be a guy who people who have no hope look at, and he is their hope. Not literally, but figuratively, he is their Messiah.
Jason Clarke plays our John Connor, and it's a character that's been deeply embedded in mythology from all the movies, but in our film, he has to make you fall in love with him in very short order, and then he has to scare the pants off you, and he was able to do both of those. And I'd just seen him in Planet of the Apes, but the film that made us all fall in love with him was probably Zero Dark 30, and we were very lucky to get him.
Jason Clarke is just one of those brilliant actors who can play simply any range.
We don't know what's going to happen next.
There's a big reveal scene in the parking structure, and Arnold actually came up to me at the end of the day and was like, David, Jason's really good. And I was like, yes, I know he is.
I do not have sufficient data to answer the question.
That's the problem with machines, no imagination.
I mean, Jason was just so powerful with his speeches, so lofty, so strong inside. He never felt kind of intimidated by the Terminator or anything else, no matter what the challenges were. So I just thought he was terrific.
It's a very enigmatic but captured guy, a man who's a messiah and has a future to fulfill to save the world, but then he's trapped in that destiny and in that world that he's been born into, and then you still didn't really know that much about him, about how he truly felt about everything that was going underneath. And I think that was a big key point for the writers and for David in figuring out why they wanted to do this and what was going to be within the heart of it. And I think John lies at the heart of it about the man and machine.
I feel like I'm just making a movie with a bunch of friends because we got to work with Byung Lee on G.I. Joe. When you think about Robert Patrick's performance, there was just something, it was a walking nightmare constantly coming at you. And the specifics of his physicality and the way he moves, the way he attacks, it's literally a nightmare that's never stopping.
It looks easy on the surface because you're not talking that much, and it's really difficult because you have to move in a way that is specific but yet different and creepy and scary all at the same time. And you also have to have a physicality. You have to have a real physicality for the role. And we knew from G.I. Joe that he had that in spades.
I literally remember thinking, well, it's only a couple of weeks. I have no idea if he'll want to do it. And we called him, and it turned out that it was actually one of the franchises that he loved and was kind of like the ultimate dream for him to be in Terminator. And so at the end, he's like, I would have done it for nothing. I just wanted to be in this movie.
This movie influenced me a lot since I was a teenager. When I was in high school, my friends called me Terminator as a nickname because they thought I looked like him, and also I was the champion of arm wrestling, so they call me Terminator. So it's kind of a coincidence to participate in this project, so it was really great.
Primates evolve over millions of years. I evolve in seconds, and I am here.
I'm a huge Doctor Who fan, and Matt as an actor had all the qualities that we were really looking for. Literally, we wanted somebody who has a quality to him that actually feels slightly inhuman. Because what he is playing is the personification of Skynet. He is 100% machine, but also an incredibly complicated artificial intelligence.
And we chased Matt Smith down. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I'd love to say like we asked him and he was like, sure, I'm gonna do it. No, we hunted him down to make him be in this movie.
It actually took a lot of conversations, as he will actually tell you. It was his mother who eventually said, you're an idiot if you don't do this, that actually got him to say yes, after he had said no about 3 times, and despite impassioned emails, and I promise you, you'll be happy you did this.
And action!
I think one of the funniest days on this set was the day it was announced that Matt Smith was going to be in this movie, because he coincidentally was here doing hair and makeup, and it felt like the internet went crazy. And now, having spent some time with Matt Smith, I can understand why.
One of the great draws for me, really, was A, to play someone that was villainous, because if I look at my career, that's been something that I've always wanted to do, and to get to do it in a franchise like this. I'm 31 now. Sort of growing up in the 80s, I think for anyone who's about my age, the first 2 movies were seminal films, really, and I think they were just really ahead of their time.
Oh yeah, did you see it? Did you? Hey, look, I got some frame grabs from the overpass. See?
JK I'd worked with a million years ago in Oz when he was a white supremacist, and he's just a joy. JK it's lucky and wonderful for us to be able to watch him win an Academy Award while we're finishing the movie, but it just confirms what we already knew.
You remember me? I was younger, more hair, less.
We like to feel that we spotted early what the rest of the world caught on to, which is the sort of stunning combination of the ability to be very light and comic, and also to have a lot of depth and understanding, and to have a kind of a performance. I mean, Whiplash is one of my favorite movies of last year. It's an incredible film.
Goddamn time traveling robots covering up their goddamn tracks. Knew it. I honestly, was not looking to do this kind of movie right now, but, there was an inquiry, and I said, let me see the script, and I read the script, and I thought, this is really great. And then I saw, all the people that were involved, and Arnold was back, and the way they deal with Arnold being however much older he is than he was in the first one, and the new actors that they've brought in, and the script, it was just a slam dunk, so I jumped on board. I know what's going on here has to be really, really complicated.
We're here to stop the end of the world.
I can work with that.
Some of the best lines are lines that JK wrote on set himself. I mean, let's be honest. Some of the best stuff, the door line.
Yeah. That's the new breacher. Big blast, no shrapnel. Blows the door clean off. For people who can't do that themselves.
JK got the character. He understood how much fun the character could be, what the role was, why he was there, how important he was in the story. He immediately understood that both the weight and the lightness that the character could provide, and lent into it in the best way.
We were so lucky.
Yeah. No, we were thrilled to have him in the movie.
Actors have egos. We all do, you know. But this team, everybody's here wanting to make the best movie they can and contribute to it. And Arnold is, you know, the most gregarious, fun guy to just hang out with on the set, you know. And then they call action, and boom, he's the guardian, and he knocks it out of the park. And then you know, hang out and have a good time. And it's been a very relaxed, fun atmosphere.
I'd never been to New Orleans before, and I was surprised at the fact that I completely fell in love with it and, you know, want to move there. And there's something about that city that is just glorious. I mean, if you're going to be on location somewhere that's pretending not to be itself, it's great to be in a city that has a wonderful culture and spirit.
It's a great town because it's such a film town now, because there's so many movies that shoot there. So you actually want to work hard to make sure that you have a distinctive look, and found, you know, a combination of incredible sets that Neil built on our stages, that many of which were out at the NASA site, and then practical locations in and around town.
Especially 1980s downtown Los Angeles, downtown New Orleans is kind of stuck in another time period, so it actually looks more like downtown LA than downtown LA does today. So that worked really well. There wasn't a ton of location work. There was a lot of outdoor work, but it was more like parking lots. We shot the Future War very early in the shooting schedule, and we went right into 6 weeks of nights, and that was a big part of it. And we shot in this giant part of the Port of Orleans, and the set was about a quarter mile long. So we had an enormous moon box suspended by a crane, enormous set pieces that Neil designed sections of the wall of the Future War camp.
There were glimpses of the Future War in Cameron's first two movies, and he was such an efficient storyteller that he did very little there. He also, I think, wasn't trying to spend money where he didn't have to spend money. I was excited that we got to develop some of the things he'd already created. There's, you know, wonderful weapons like the Hunter Killers and the Spider Tanks that are all very cool, and we got to do our versions of those. We got to actually spend time, you know, with sort of gritty, you know, full-on, full production of what it would be like to be in that kind of battle.
There was so much pyro and atmosphere and extras and endoskeletons. We flipped the goer truck in that scenario. That was actually the second unit that actually flipped the truck. It was a big handoff between the first unit and the second unit, but all the things with the actors leading into and coming out of each stunt or event was shot by the first unit. It was a real close collaboration between the art department and the lighting department and everybody else, you know, stunts, effects, pyro, actors, directors.
It's basically D-Day, and you see literally the resistance throw everything that they've got at Skynet, and it is a massive battle, and it is the biggest Future War sequence that has been in a Terminator movie to date.
The Griffith Park sequence was, you know, tremendously involved in recreating actual Griffith Park in New Orleans in a parking lot. It's surreal to see it all put together.
With Arnold, I think there was a turning point for everybody. You know, for me, I knew he had to be in the movie, but I never met him. And I remember having breakfast with him the first time and having no idea what kind of person I was going to be meeting. You know, he's a movie star forever. He's an action star forever. He was governor. I have no idea what kind of human being that's going to lead to. And the first line I crossed was realizing that he's wonderful to be around. He's open and sensible and funny, and, you know, not just my first breakfast with him, but then with the crew, seeing him laugh, and he always eats lunch with the crew. He's completely unpretentious that way.
One of my favorite moments was when we were shooting the Griffith Park Observatory the very first night, and it's Arnold's reveal in the movie where he pulls his hoodie back and he says, "I've been waiting for you."
Ready and action!
I've been waiting.
you actually got to look around at the entire crew. The age range is early 20s to 60, and everybody's just grinning ear to ear because the Terminator is on set.
Take and action!
I've been waiting for you.
It's the thing he was born to do. And he's phenomenal at it. And it was like all of a sudden you were stepping back in time and remembering where you were, both for T1 and T2, every time Arnold walked on screen.
I've been waiting for you. In this movie, you see this same scene as the 1984 scene, except the scene will unfold in a different way. Except now, because of the visual effects that you can do, and because of the technology that's available, you can tell that story even better.
What was really challenging about it is the Guardian in 1984 is, 20 plus years younger than Arnold himself. We actually scoured the earth to find basically a bodybuilder by the name of Brett. He was the only person who had that 50-inch back that Arnold actually had, but his biceps and quads, everything else was slightly lesser than. And then obviously that served as really our proxy. So when you shoot the fight sequence, Arnold and basically everyone has something to interact with.
It's wonderful. To me, it reminds me sort of the encounter between the T-1000 and Arnold in T2, where they first face each other, and there's something just fun about watching these two things that have the massive Mack trucks going at each other. So it's a human scale fight with punches being thrown, but each one is, like a pile driver. The fight tilts in one direction because, let's face it, our Guardian's been around a little longer and he's starting to show some wear and tear. But yeah, this sort of meeting between two perfectly matched titans is exciting.
One of the things we said as we were developing the script is we'd love for people to think, up until they get to the moment that Kyle Reese returns to 1984, oh my God, are they really just remaking the first movie but with a bigger Future War sequence? Why would they do that? And the reality is we're not. But we are pretty meticulously are recreating that initial 1984 sequence. Again, it's not a shot-for-shot remake, but there's definitely a lot of homage.
3, 2, 1, go!
Come with me if you want to live.
Sometimes we felt like, oh God, we have to shoot this way because look, that's how it was done before. We had to find the right balance of how much we were recreating them exactly and how much we were sort of doing our versions of them. But it was fun to do that, and it's been fun to watch audiences respond to them, especially the fans that really get them. And occasionally we go shot by shot, to the original movie, and feeling the fans react to that has been really fun. Because the broader audience may not understand exactly what the reference is, but the fans, there's a wonderful sort of laugh that you feel in the audience.
Set and action!
3, 2, 1, go!
Come with me if you want to live. Now, soldier.
And we cut.
Cut.
The power plant was a big set piece, which was actually a real, location, abandoned power plant.
We scouted a bunch of different actual locations here in New Orleans, and that particular building has so much richness and character and age. Just a great sort of old abandoned feeling to it. It also needed to be able to hold the armored truck, be big enough for an interesting fight.
How do you even describe that building? It sort of has a roof.
Yes, it was basically an abandoned power station. And it was kind of falling apart, and we actually had a horrible day where we got rained out, and there was literally a monsoon that came in, and we were like, well, we're inside, we're gonna be fine. And there were holes in the roof.
No.
And so the whole thing—
There's about 3 feet of water.
Yeah. And then after that, we're like, well, great, we'll go to the cover set, but all the trucks had sunk into the mud at the power station. So literally me and Dana were sitting in our trailers till about 3 a.m. till we were finally like, this is not going to stop. We are not going to shoot today.
And for the record, it was forecast for scattered showers.
Yes.
Getting Byung-hun Lee to play the T-1000 was fantastic. He took it so seriously. He was so focused on getting the choreography right for this character. He was correcting me occasionally when I would suggest something, and he would say, I don't think he would do that. because he'd really thought about it. And I think he's achieved some of the things that Robert Patrick achieved in the T2, which sort of set the bar for this kind of creature. He's physically beautiful, he's graceful, he's elegant, but he's lethal and scary.
Sounds fit. Hey, Mark.
I watched T2 again. Actually, I watched it a lot. And it was still so fun. And I try to be like him.
Sarah, go!
Action-wise, it was so different because I've never acted not as a human, as a machine. I couldn't blink, I couldn't breathe.
Action.
It was just such a perfect fit. He was like performed just like a machine. Is he really a machine, or what's going on here? Because he was so good and so precise. He would do 10 takes, and he would hit not a millimeter away from the mark every single time. I talked to him at one point, and he told me that he believes, like I do, in reps, because he comes from the athletic background, and so it's all about reps. Doing it over and over in order to be precise.
As soon as I got here, production introduced me the movement coach. I thought I was gonna meet, some action coordinator or a stunt guy, but Nito, he's basically a dancer. So I was a little surprised by that, but he was really good for my movements, and he helped me a lot.
Neil built enormous set pieces. The tunnels, the interior was all beautiful sets built by Neil and conceived by Neil as if there were tunnels underneath this power plant.
Here we go. And action.
So you set a trap.
Had to. Can't leave any future tech behind when we go.
Go. Go where?
The TDD that is in 1984.
And I wanted it to feel like, that we would believe we were underneath that building. I think that the board form concrete is really a beautiful job. The scenic work in here is really nice, feels great, feels dank, feels, underground. I think the electromagnets are pretty great on this. The copper tubing and the sort of mismatched sizes of it, and how it feels organized in a disorganized kind of way. I think that's what we were trying to do with the Guardian. All of the computer equipment is early 80s Apple and computers. Well, one of the rules of time travel is that you have to be in a cold room. They're really refrigeration units, and we got them from a bunch of various junkyards, and there they are. Some are radiators, actually.
We can't be wearing anything?
Yeah, I know how time travel works. Sarah.
The number of arms and how they work, the number of rings and how they spin, the way that a person is lifted into the time machine, the idea that the room is cold. It applies to the other sets. So the frosted quality of the edges of things, and the idea that we're refrigerating the space.
In regards to really being a film-friendly town in New Orleans, something we could never do anywhere but New Orleans is the freeway arrival sequence. We literally kind of had this dream of, let's shut down the largest overpass in New Orleans and shoot on it for 3 nights. You couldn't do that in New York or San Francisco, and New Orleans was like, absolutely. We'll shut the whole thing down for you. It'll be fine. You can bring your crews on there. And we kind of looked at each other. We're like, they're really gonna let us do this?
3 days.
This is great. And so again, that sequence has that scale to it because New Orleans allowed us to, shoot that sequence there that literally no place else in the world would let us do it.
All right, let's go. I'll get us out of here. Stay close.
Wait. We all know they can shapeshift. If you are John, prove it.
Sarah! No, she's right, Kyle. She is.
Jason Clarke, playing John Connor is an incredibly dynamic actor, and that's what this particular version of John Connor really requires.
Jason is just so intense in his portrayal of John that it's much less about gunfire than it is about the physicality of what he created, because it's not quite human.
And it's sort of the power of charisma, and you see that in the beginning. The charismatic leader who what happens if you take a Messiah and you push him, you let him fall from grace in a way that inflicts him to be on the other side. What is that point of view?
Ready, and action.
John! I always look at a character from, what he's doing is right in his own mind. And I think John's agenda and his decision about what's happened to him is very justified, in terms of he believes that the only way to break this cycle is to not just side with the machine, but become part of the machine.
Let him go. Right now.
He truly believes that this is the way ahead, and he would like to take Sarah and Kyle with him, But we all have to make our own choices.
See, I'm not machine. I'm not man. I'm more.
What do you want from us?
I'm offering us a future together. As a family. No more widows and orphans.
What I love about Jason's performance is he didn't really go from being the all good guy to the all bad guy. He sort of kept a continuity there, where even as the villain, he still thinks he's doing the right thing. So John Connor dramatically goes from being our greatest hope to being our greatest threat. Inverting him so that he becomes the biggest threat is just dramatically fun. And it also feels like it's within Cameron's mythology, because one of the most brilliant things he did was that big inversion of taking the villain from the first film, making him the hero of the second film.
And we got. Wait, one more.
We've had a lot of fun as a little troupe. Jason, it's funny. I mean, the demands of this shoot schedule have led to a situation where two Aussie guys in the same cast haven't even had a beer together yet, which I'm pretty embarrassed about, to be honest. But it's the truth, and I think that's just testament to how hard everyone's been working. It's been nuts, but it had to be in order to, get this thing done and done right.
There are things that New Orleans could really deliver for us. And the one place we went on location to actually nail it was San Francisco, because our film ends there, and we had to get some of the iconography that you only get there to go to the Golden Gate and go to the bunkers up in the hills above the Golden Gate. Oh, I love it. It's the way to do it. It becomes realer for everybody, and one less degree of pretend.
San Francisco has such a unique look and a unique quality of light. And it was so helpful to actually be able to capture some of that. Gives scope and scale, so it really ties in what we did in New Orleans.
Yeah, how much would it cost to shift all the buses and motorcycles to that end?
Because we were shooting in New Orleans in the summer. By the time we left, it was a little warm, to say the least. And then we take our entire crew to San Francisco, and we're all wearing sweaters and jackets because we're freezing.
Bang! Fog and trying to shoot on the bridge.
We really wanted beautiful, pristine shots of the Golden Gate Bridge, and we got a lot of standing around looking at clouds going, wait, it's moving, turn the cameras on.
Yeah. We actually went back up there later to get the crystal clear shots.
To get the beautiful, beautiful shots that you see in the movie. But hey, it's real, and it gives atmosphere to the film.
Hi, you're towering.
So it starts after my recognizing.
Yeah. Alan Taylor is he's just so good. He's just so good.
Alan is, I don't understand how anybody, can keep all these balls in the air and have a clue about what's going on. And his sense of the big picture is so complete and so thorough.
He's a very smart man, and he knows story, and he knows actors, and he comes from some of the greatest TV ever done, The Sopranos, and then on Game of Thrones and Mad Men. You know, he's been a pleasure to work with, like really.
The great thing about Alan Taylor is he doesn't get intimidated. A lot of times when I have a new director in the film, you know, they don't know how far should they go with correcting me, or what should they say and how should they say it. And a lot of times directors would then go to my team or to my assistant, to someone and says, can you tell him, you know, to tone it down a little bit or to bring it up a little bit, but not Alan Taylor, because he and I, we talked about it beforehand, and we said, look, if there's a scene that you don't like, then just tell me this doesn't work.
Ideally, on action, you start to walk. This time, it felt like you hesitated, and you came in fast.
Oh, I see.
So I think coming not so hard. It's just basically you're walking forward.
Exactly. Okay, good. Yeah. From day one on, he was never intimidated, and he came right to me, and he always very gentlemanlike, may I remind you. He would get the point across very clear that we can do better than that. And then you put more energy in it, and he really is there to pump you up. It's a little bit almost like a shrink, you know, that comes in there. Says, now I remember that here yesterday we did this. Today we're doing it in a different way. And just think about when you do this scene in Conan, and then you crush the enemy. Just give me that drive.
We are filming at NASA, where you need about a zillion passes to get in. The sets are as big as the moon.
What about that? Is it dangerous?
Polyalloy requires programming to take permanent form. Without the CPU, it is harmless.
The whole concept of world building and visual design was very much a close collaboration between myself and Neil, the production designer. There's a lot of discussion about how we would incorporate lighting into his sets, because there's so much technology and light.
Matt Smith plays the T-5000, which is something that we've never seen, which is very much the personification of Skynet walking the Earth.
For me, what's been exciting about this challenge is that it's the idea and the notion that I get to play someone that's a bad guy. And that's something that I've been really interested in. And you know, we hope as the T-5000 develops that he's going to be, you know, pure supervillain.
Why can't you just accept it? Because we're human.
The final battle sequence in the third act is epic. Good versus evil, and technology versus man, and a huge amount was shot by the second unit. People often ask me when I work on a movie like this, oh, was it all blue screen? Was it just, you know, action? And it's not all blue screen. I mean, there's, you know, a huge amount of blue screen that we do, but there's also a tremendous amount of in-camera photography.
Action.
Well, if you're going to throw it down with anyone on the screen, you want it to be Schwarzenegger. I love that. I mean, he's a lot of fun, you know.
Close up of him again. Of me again.
And he's still in shape. I mean, he's a strong dude. And he knows what he's doing. I mean, he's got so much experience with fights and on film.
One, action!
Well, you only get to do this kind of action on a big budget film. I mean, lots of, you know, suspension, ropes, pulleys and all that, but not just in a base. I mean, some of them have very complicated setups and ups and moves, and you know, just use them just for a big wild swing, but just a little bit here and pull there.
And action!
It's just that great thing of trying to, you know, so that each adds to the other, that it becomes, but still based in a reality, in a, you know, in a world that we've created that exists, and we stick to the rules. And Arnold really talked a lot about the fighting and how Terminators fight and how you know, that him and Jim, you know, particularly in the ones that they did together, it was a real big thing about the style of the way it operates. And you know, I know we've all worked very hard to try and, you know, be true to that and also keep that imagination and that thread going.
When you see the final product, no matter how much you've thought about what it's going to look like in the end, it's always, you know, a jaw dropper to see a set that's been fully extended and executed, and all the different CG elements that are in there. You're just like, wow.
It's some of the most enjoyable action I've ever done. You know, it's creative and it's fun. Coming down off the ledge, jumping up and down on a big pile drive. It's been cool, you know.
Terminator Genesis was very challenging from a visual effects point of view.
One of the things that, as a huge fan of Terminator, and one of the things we knew that the fans really wanted, I mean, if you read any online commentaries, that people want to see the fully rendered future war. And so obviously our movie opens up on the day that John Connor leads humanity basically to success against the machines. And it is the biggest future war sequence that has been in a Terminator movie to date.
The future war, the war camp war, was for most parts really sort of initiated with like a lot of concept work. We received basically these sort of plates from the principal photography, and it sort of, you know, came with the premises of extending it and making it sort of this post-apocalyptic environment. And the more we got involved in the sequence and the more we started working on it, the more it became clear that the premises was like, you know, the more the better, where, you know, almost nothing could fit into the image anymore, you know. So it was about like making it as epic and as big as humanly possible.
The HKs and the T-800s are obviously canon from the first two movies. They were kind of updated and redesigned by our incredible visual effects team, which is really led by, you know, Yannick Surs and Sherry Hansen. There were the spider tanks, which were a new design, obviously, that Jim had actually developed very, very early on, but they were never actually able to bring them to fruition. It was really fun getting to actually sit, you know, obviously in post for many, many months with the VFX team, obviously helping to develop and create these shots.
Yannick Surs, he's our visual effects supervisor, and he's probably got more experience at these movies than any of us, so we're all a little bit intimidated by him. He sort of keeps us on our toes. Frequently he pushes back when we suggest things, and he's found solutions for things that we didn't find, and just the bar he sets for the finished visual effects is very, very high.
What excited me about this Terminator movie was probably the prospect of the recreation of the young Arnold character.
You know, Yannick Surs, who's our visual effects supervisor, and Sherry Hansen, who's our visual effects producer, probably the first thing they ever said to us after they read the script was, the John Connor design is going to be challenging, but the young Arnold in Griffith Park, you're not going to get that until you rip it out of our hands the very last minute when this movie is locked.
It is already difficult enough, I guess, to create a human being digitally. It becomes even more difficult if that human being is like such an iconic figure as Arnold Schwarzenegger. Right from the start, we couldn't leave any stone unturned. So our whole process, how we did digital characters in the past, had to be evaluated and changed or invent new technologies wherever possible to just raise the bar. The observatory sequence of the Griffith Park sequence that we worked on sort of, you know, splits almost into two portions, into two halves. Like the first portion being basically the recreation of the original movie scenes, you know, of the arrival from the young Arnold, and we're basically introducing that young Arnold character traveling back in time. Then the second half and the second part is basically where the storyline deviates a little bit, and that's when young Arnold is basically finding himself, like, you know, being exposed or to an opponent which is basically himself, just at an older age, and that's from there on effectively where we have this sort of face-off between young versus old.
I've been waiting for you
First, we built the set in New Orleans and shot it practically. Arnold obviously plays the Guardian, but there's the entire process of youthifying, obviously, Guardian to turn our 67-year-old Arnold Schwarzenegger into a 50-year-old version of himself. Then we actually scoured the earth to find basically a bodybuilder by the name of Brett, who basically is the only human being on the planet who is almost as big as Arnold was when he was Mr. Universe.
It was all sort of choreographed with a stunt double. You sort of acted it out. But what happened throughout the process is we basically had to discard the plate almost entirely. We almost had to say, like, okay, the lens isn't quite right to be, correct enough and close enough to the original footage, and the framing isn't quite right. So we decided basically to go almost full CG.
The first process is you build the model, which gets you very, very close to where you want to be. But then at the end of it, you get into this uncanny area when you're looking at it to where you're 5% off, things will look right, but it's that glint behind the eyes, it's the way the light interacts with your skin, all of this incredibly finite detail that separates from something that feels actually alive and living and something that just feels dead. Well, the sculpt of his cheekbones feel a little bit better. His face feels just a little bit wider. And I think if we take that down, and so we really feel like, I think it'll accentuate the cheek line more, make the jawline more defined, which is so Arnold.
The review process with our clients started off, at the beginning mostly with us working together with Yannick, basically. And we sort of had regular review sessions with him 2 or 3 times a week where we went through the processes and the steps. With a character like the young Arnold, it was something that took pretty much our entire time from the start of the show when we first started working on this project all the way to the end, where we literally continuously built and refined this young Arnold character. Then further down the line, when it came more to the shot production, we started being more and more exposed to the filmmakers like Alan Taylor, on David Ellison and Dana Goldberg. It was a highly creative process, but also a very time-consuming process for us to study and research like what Arnold it was like back then, effectively.
Nice night for a walk.
Wash day tomorrow. Nothing clean, right?
Nothing clean. Right.
Terminator movies have a history of phenomenal practical effects and groundbreaking visual effects.
Cameron, when he makes movies, always pushes the envelope on what's possible, and on T2 he did it in a big way that really had a sort of pride of place in the movie. The T-1000 technology seemed impossible at the time. I remember seeing it, and I think we all thought, how do you do that?
Well, Terminator 2 was made at really the dawn of the CG character age. We made a whole movie in 1990, it was released in the summer of '91, that had a fluid metallic character as the bad guy. So we were betting the farm on this new technique, and it kind of just blew up. 2.5 decades later, it's an extremely mature art form.
Well, the T-1000, we wanted to explore about how we could take it any further with the breaking down and the transformation of the form. We did a whole bunch of different fancy fluid sims and all the rest of it, but they actually, if anything, the more complex we got, the further away we got from the original material. Weirdly enough, we went completely full circle back to almost doing it in a similar fashion to how they did it on T2, to actually obtain that similar sort of look. So, for example, the shot where he comes through the window in the police car is all just a series of sculpts. Equally, when he melts in the acid bath, that is all pure fluid sim.
We had some fantastic performance from Byung for the T-1000, and we really wanted to get the essence of his acting across, even though parts of him were going to be fully CG. To tackle that, we really developed a pipeline that allowed us to work iteratively in effects very quickly to dial in more of his performance or dial it more towards effects for dramatic effect, specifically in the acid bath sequence of him being eroded away.
It's very hard to surprise people. So, the challenge on this film was, yes, we're going to see Terminator endoskeletons, and we're going to see a lot of other CG effects that you might not think too much about. But in the center of it all is this new bad guy. And he can't just be the same simple liquid metal dude that we saw, a couple decades ago. So they've gone to a much higher level.
I think we kept pushing ourselves to try and find a vocabulary for that villain and the imagery that would be almost as challenging. Cameron's T-1000 was a beautiful creature that was absolutely simple, and we have a beautiful creature that is absolutely complex, and so we're sort of embracing complexity in our T-3000.
D-Nick did an unbelievable job on this movie and really delivered in every single way with the design of John Connor, who is a
man-machine hybrid whose body has actually been infected on a cellular level.
You know, you have to think about the lineage behind it all. You know, from the T-800, the T-1000, what would be the next design, being as it's Skynet that's designed this thing. So he is, at the start, they're just replicating him. So it's a nanosite humanoid thing.
That hurt.
We start to develop this from last year, basically from how he looks like, from the concept to modeling, to shader. We went through a lot of development until roughly last December. It's kind of confirmed.
The fact that Cyberdyne had come up with a way of replacing and improving on the human body with these intelligent particles. He was never in a stable state. He was constantly being reinvented, and the analogy we came up with was as if he was being 3D printed.
My mission was to literally build this like superhuman, but with all this design in it. We started like some kind of two branch of it, like one be like fully nanotech kind of organic fields, and one would be like more close to T-800's Skynet fields. Ultimately, this would be like the containers and the guides for all the nanomachine effects, which would be on top of this.
Our job kind of started once the design was sort of settled. So our job was to actually make him look like he's made out of a million little nanobots or something, some sort of nanotech that's kind of making up the whole idea of John Connor. Traditional animation, you would just animate each point, but it gets really tricky for like a million nanopoints. So we came up with algorithms and we invented all those really advanced techniques, but once it was all set up, it was the machine doing the work for us, because you're never going to get away with like animating millions of points for like 1,000 shots.
Crank it!
They can't kill John Connor, you know, so then they need to control John Connor. So the T-2000 in that sense is not a, you know, it's not a straight robot. It is partly John. It's very important to us that you saw that Jason's features, his performance was still there. What we thought was cool with this is he controls his own magnetic fields, right? That's how his form is actually generated. The reason that we have the MRI scene is to actually see that he is susceptible to something. So yes, he's slowly being pulled apart in layers on that particular shot, and you can see the various different organs in there. So that's obviously after that he's designed a little bit more all the way through the film to the point where you see him in the fight at the end. He's a much more streamlined and ripped version of that.
There's that technique, it's called phasing. It's when the T-3000 goes through the Terminator and shreds his cloth and all his skin. Obviously, that's something we've never seen before, and it's really hard to imagine because it's such an advance and it's really complicated and complex to describe. Obviously, we need to show like different versions and different ideas and go through like a lot of iterations.
The phasing was one kind of trademark moment within that sequence where he's supposed to kind of separate and then reform around Guardian, go through him, create a lot of damage. And basically, Jason Clarke turns into his T-3000 form.
Obviously, you need to get the animation right. It needs to look like two guys are actually fighting. So we had like this really advanced motion capture technology, which kind of fed into the animation, which then fed into the nanofication process. And that bring all that pretty much from CG onto the screen to like a photoreal composite. That was a tough challenge.
That is one of the last shots that they finished on the movie, and in that shot, John Connor, T-1000 is entirely CG, Arnold Schwarzenegger in Guardian is entirely CG, and the environment that they take place in is 90% CG. And literally it looks photorealistic and perfect, and the work they have done on this movie is truly, truly groundbreaking.
What are you?
I'm Skynet.
The T-5000 was, it went through a few looks before we finally settled on what you will see in the finished film. But I guess the general concept behind it was a projection, but it was obviously a projection that eventually grew and became a physical object. So in this case, we went by the whole belief that this laser would ionize the air and actually create particles from elements that were already there, but they were just almost solidifying them. So as he grew, he became more and more of a physical creature.
So it starts as a child, it grows all the way through to be Matt Smith and the T-5000. So we wanted that as some kind of design ethic to show evolution, complexity, and rapid growth. There was a lot of ideas about what the T-5000 should be. I mean, what is pure Skynet?
Phosphorescence is really the element that we looked at because we wanted kind of the air particles to ionize on, and not the hologram you've seen 1,000 times, but for it to be something different with technology you hadn't seen before.
You know, if you go night diving, you shut off all your lights and you wave your hand underwater, you'll get these kind of green phosphorescence that will glow and kind of ionize on, ionize off. And that was really the concept behind how to create really the T5000 in Matt Smith.
In addition to sort of all of the beauty aspects of what they were creating, they also then had to really fit into a very logical box. How much of the face do we want to see? How much of the body do we really want to see? We needed him to be immediately recognizable. When Jai looks at him and says, that's the thing that attacked John.
That's the thing that attacked John.
I didn't attack John. I saved him.
We needed to really understand that he had the ability to do that.
The feedback that I've been given or that I've received so far from the filmmakers or from Yannick or Sherry, it's been positive. And I think everyone on the production side was very happy, and I hope that they all were very pleased with the results.
Hopefully the guys in the audience look at the T1000, the T3000 and still see that it harks back to the original material, you know, albeit with a slightly different twist. You know, it's a lot of work. A huge amount of people have worked a lot of time on this, and hopefully it shows.
Thank you very much for your time.
First, going back to Terminator, it all starts with James Cameron. I mean, for me, he is simply the greatest filmmaker alive. The movie was so far ahead of its time, and the thing that I actually really loved about it was that it wasn't just a great science fiction movie, it wasn't just a great man versus machine movie, it was actually a love story at the center of it.
At the heart of this great science fiction film is this real emotional story. I still remember watching the original Terminator and thinking way back then, oh wow, this is a love story. It's this incredible science fiction movie, and Arnold Schwarzenegger is this killer robot, and it's all incredibly cool. But for me, the movie always boiled down to the line, I came across time for you, Sarah.
There was no comparable female action, not even like a hero, an archetype. I mean, I think that's the thing that Jim does just so beautifully, is he taps into this warrior goddess archetype. And Sarah was so, for me anyway, I just remember finding it a very revolutionary experience creatively.
For me, one of the things when we actually did get the rights to Terminator was, okay, why now? Because if you're going to do a newer version of a movie like this, you shouldn't just do it just because you bought the rights. It's how do you make it relevant? And for us, the why now has always been the technology.
You know, in the original film, Skynet had to bash through your front door, but today it's completely different. We line up days before the new iPhone comes out to basically go get to the Apple Store to actually, you know, invite Skynet in through the front door. We're constantly giving away our privacy. We can't live without our phone.
If you look around a restaurant, how many people are actually talking to one another and how many people are looking down at devices? How much of our lives are absolutely dependent upon devices? And this movie basically poses the ultimate question of, at what point is the tipping point? And that is what Genesis is. Genesis is the moment of that tipping point.
A lot of people have asked us, there was no version of Terminator without Arnold Schwarzenegger. I mean, Arnold is the Terminator. It's his most iconic role.
But yes, it was incumbent upon us to try to figure out a way that you don't feel like you're just seeing him do a repeat of any of the other movies. And that was really important to all of us. We wanted to be very respectful of Arnold, and we wanted to be very respectful of the character that he created. I mean, it's a legacy character.
30 years ago, we started with that franchise, and I did not think then, when we did the first Terminator, there ever will be a sequel. But now, all of a sudden, here's the fifth. And not only the fifth, but 30 years later, you get asked to come back and to be the Terminator again. So this was really a fantastic kind of news to me, and I was honored that I was offered the role again. I'm still the Terminator 30 years later, so that was really extraordinary.
We had been writing a different project for David and Dana, David Ellison at Skydance. And as we were finishing the first pass on that, they had been putting together the rights with Megan Ellison for doing a new Terminator film. I think they had talked to Lita a few times, in which she kept saying no. Yeah.
I did not feel comfortable. I didn't feel comfortable given my relationship with the person who had created the universe. It felt like, mildly sacrilegious.
And then you changed your mind?
Well, I finally ended up talking to Jim about whether or not he thought I should do it. And he was incredibly supportive in a way that only someone with that level of creative generosity can be. It was a world that he had left behind, and he felt that I should, if I wanted to go ahead and do it, that it would not be anything that he felt would hurt the franchise.
The writer's a good friend of mine, Lita Kalagridis, and she has a writing partner, Patrick, that she works with now. But she and I have written together in the past. So she kind of asked me to, unofficially advise, and I said, look, the thing that's most clear to me is, I think the Terminator, there's a way to explore his character that could actually be fun and open it up more while still giving fans what they want. And it has to do with this idea that he's not really a robot. He's a cyborg. He has a robotic endoskeleton, but the org part of cyborg is an organic organism. So he's got living human tissue over the outside. And so that would age. And so the idea that Arnold now, as a 60-something, is playing the same character that he played back when he was in his late 30s, or mid-30s, I guess, is perfectly plausible in that world if you buy into the conceits of that world.
The construction of the story, it wasn't about creating a reboot. It wasn't about creating something that nullified the films that have gone before. It was about creating a story that could work in concert with what happened before. One of the first things we came up with and pitched was the Arnold and Arnold fight. The idea of old Arnold fighting young Arnold, and how that would pay respect to the original world that Jim created, literally in a shot-by-shot manner, and then deviate and show the left turn that we were going to go, and how we were going to continue on in different directions.
And we also started from a place of, for us, a Terminator universe is always going to have fundamental aspects to it. In this case, it's always going to have a Sarah Connor, it's always going to have a Kyle Reese, it's always going to have a John, and it's always going to have a Terminator. They just may not resemble the versions that you've seen previously. And, that did lead ultimately to what is the big twist in our movie.
I would say it was much more Patrick's sort of inspiration, because I was too afraid to push the story that far at that point.
Up to the moment we were going to meet with Skydance and pitch them the ideas that we were beginning to germinate. That morning, kept thinking, what do you do with the savior of the world? How do you take him on a journey that is unexpected? And what, from Skynet's point of view, is the thing that always trips Skynet up?
That is the most important part to me, is if you are Skynet and you are an AI and a learning machine,
you realize that because of the loops of time travel, time travel loops and loops and loops and loops, and so at some point in that loop, Skynet figures out the thing that always makes it lose is John Connor. And if I want to win, well, I need one of those. And if I can't make one of those, I will take it, and I will co-opt it, and I will make it be mine. So thought of that in the morning. It's one of those things where you're in the shower, and you're like, oh, what if we do that? I remember calling Lita, so I have this crazy idea. Oh, yeah, and Lita was like, well, I don't know if we can do that. That's what I was. We had talked about maybe infecting Kyle and have that infection sort of going out over the period of the movie, and it's sort of a gradual thing. And the call ends, and we haven't decided if it's going to be that way or not. And
I can't believe you're actually going to tell this story.
And then we go into the pitch meeting, and we're sitting there, and Lita starts pitching, and
lo and behold,
I have no idea which version she's going to pitch. And suddenly she pitches, and then John is, the villain is co-opted by Skynet and they were like, oh, that's it. And it was just like, oh crap, I guess we're doing that one.
The idea of taking John Connor and flipping him to the bad guy and showing, basically a synthesis of a human being and an artificial intelligence. That character is really, really fun to watch and really fun to explore what the emotional repercussions of that would be with Sarah, with the Terminator, and with Kyle Reese, because they all have relationships with John Connor that all have to be rewritten as a result of what happens in this film.
You said all the other subjects died, right? Well, that means John's one of a kind. He's unique. All right, there's no way of knowing what he's capable of.
You're right, and that's what makes him so dangerous. John is not humanity's last hope anymore. He's Skynet's.
There's phenomenal action in Terminator movies, and we plan to live up to that promise. But a lot of people can shoot action. Not a lot of people can really get true character-driven performances in the middle of, again, a giant science fiction film.
I love and worship at the altar of Game of Thrones. To me, it simply redefined what you can do on television. And Alan Taylor was a massive part of those first few seasons.
You're never approached directly about things. I was finishing my last movie, and I came in to have a meeting with Skydance, who had been developing it for years with Megan Ellison. And we had a general meeting, and we talked about a bunch of things, and they mentioned Terminator, but I never thought they were mentioning it for me. And then we had a meeting a week later, and it was all about Terminator. And at that point, it was equal parts, oh my God, excitement, and also, oh my God, how on earth, do I step up to that? Knowing that Arnold was going to be in this and that he's aged and he's a different guy now, the excitement for me was to really embrace that and say, we're not going to brush that into the table. We're not going to pretend. We're going to explore, what does it mean for a machine to be trapped in a timeline with no access to future technology? What's going to happen to that machine over time? That was the key to finding a new thing to do with Arnold in that role. It's a source of humor in the movie. It's also a source of pathos. Your heart goes out to him, and so that was exciting. The first creative sort of teammate I reached for was Kramer Morgenthau, who had been my DP on various things. We met on Boardwalk Empire. I took him into Game of Thrones, and then we did Thor together, so there was sort of a shorthand and a camaraderie there, and I love his work, and I think he can make things look epic and beautiful.
The pre-production process on this picture was tremendously involved, and huge amount of moving parts, working very closely with Neil, the production designer, and figuring out the places where practical photography leaves off and virtual photography takes over.
Neil Spisak came on as our production designer, and he and I had never worked with him before, but we just sort of met people, and I loved the way he talked about the worlds.
That's how much space we have. I know you included the pillar. That's Big Bear. But what I liked about this was,
The entire concept of really turning a ruined LAX into the opening sequence where the future war took place was entirely Neil's idea. And he came in with these phenomenal renderings that he had done of it, and it was just like kind of all of our jaws hit the ground, and we're like, this has to be the guy for the movie.
I think our helicopter should be gray.
Oh, this is the Future War stuff?
Future War, yeah.
And he had some real challenges involving things that had existed, like the hunter-killers and the spider tanks, but making them cool for our time. And we're creating our time displacement device, which has been referred to but never seen before.
Kramer, of course, likes the darker.
Two ideas. One, when they come back to the third act, it'll probably look like this.
One of the major points of the design of this movie is that we travel through different realities, and finding a way to keep them separated and to make it clear as to which reality you're in at which time. So the 1980s is a more saturated palette, more colorful palette. And the 2017 will be very real and yet modern. There is a pretty strong color control in terms of its gray palette. So there's a sort of cleanness to it, I guess, especially because of so much of it being about Cyberdyne.
Neil came in from moment one, and same as Kramer, with such a respect for the Cameron films. You know, so many of the people who worked on this movie felt such a responsibility to want to live up to those films. The look, the palettes, you know, sort of the tones, but we have to stand on our own 2 feet.
Obviously, there were massive set builds on this movie. Every single time you walked onto one of its sets, they were jaw-dropping. Neil literally rose to the challenge. The film would not be what it is without the amazing work that he did.
We're at Legacy Effects. We're here in the process of building Terminators. And once again, for me, this is a really neat thing because my first big movie, the first movie that I count, was the first Terminator. I've worked on all of them, and so it's quite an honor to be involved again with this. So what's pretty neat is to see the evolution of the technology that has gone into particularly creating these endoskeletons. And the rapid prototyping process and sculpting, you know, digitally in the computer has given us a sense of symmetry and machine preciseness that is so different than how it was originally done when it was all sculpted by hand in clay, then molded, then all the pieces taken out, painstakingly hand sanded and redone. And, you know, you look back at it fondly because it was such an iconic character. But the precision and the cleanness and how we've created these things now is really remarkable.
When it comes to practical and creature effects, there is nobody that does a better job in our industry than Legacy. And the amount of love, respect, and brilliance that they brought to the project has been all of their work. Literally, there was no question to us that they had to be a part of this.
We were updating some of the look of some of our creatures. The T-800 endoskeleton is adapted a little bit, and they were so familiar with Arnold, which is a big part of it. He was the first fully body scanned actor, I think, way back when they were doing it last time, so they still have that around. And just the use of prosthetics on him was always kind of flawless, and a lot of talk about how much can you damage Guardian, how much can you damage Arnold, so you hang on to the humanity in this creature. They already had a vocabulary for that because they'd been through it before.
This is the model that we received from client before any process. It's pretty elaborately modeled as is, but there's still a lot of stuff that is required to finish it to make it a viable, tangible object. This is the chest of the T-800, and it's basically broken down into logical parts for assembly. All the different colors represent the different parts that we have grown and how we've actually broken it apart for the process of building.
The final endoskeleton is made out of various kinds of epoxies and urethanes and rubbers, but that stuff is not self-supporting as far as strength goes, so we had to put a skeleton inside of that that's mostly made out of precision machined aluminum. This would be the spine, the neck. This is where the skull of the endoskeleton goes. And this is one of his arms. We don't know whether they're gonna ever be used as puppets or not, but we like to set them up so that they could potentially be puppets, so all of these individual joints can lock off like a traditional rod puppet so that it could be performed on set if it needed to be.
So this is a special build for a stunt mask, but we did the full endoskeleton same way. Most of it was 3D printed in-house. I have up on the monitor right now the skeleton. It was real nice and satisfying actually being able to print something like this.
We're standing in the model shop. We do all the finish work on the rapid prototype parts that come off the beds. We do all the finishing of the parts as far as sanding the parts, sanding all the lines off the parts, prepping them for the molding process. And then once all these castings are done, they come back into here and the guys start doing a final assembly. And that's what Toy is doing here. He's taking the skull to the T800 and he's cleaned it all up and he's putting all the final little details back in, including the eyes and all the parts that are needed to create this final piece. Nick is doing final assembly here on the arm. I would say there was approximately 50 pieces to this arm. So you can see here the fingers are articulated, positionable, and yet they're quite flexible, you can see here, even though they look metallic. And the wrist is also articulated, move from side to side.
What's kind of neat about this one is that, all the other endos, from part 1, 2, and 3, all those were all chrome plated, and this one is just a paint treatment, which I thought was pretty neat. From head to toe, every little nook and cranny that you see in here has to get a black wash on it. And you can tell from where I did do it already, where it looks darker than where I haven't done it on the chest, which is real bright. And then wipe it off and just let the black settle into the lines, and that just pulls out, all the detail. You get to see all the cool lines and all the nice shapes and forms a lot better when you have a black line defining everything for you.
Wanted to introduce you guys to the T800 endoskeleton. This is one of 3 endos that we're going to have on the show. This being the hero. This one will be mostly for lighting for these actual CG walking characters, but every now and then I'm sure we'll get a shot off where we have an insert piece or something of that nature. So that's why we wanted to try to make them as articulated as possible. So if we had to, we could literally have them go in, do an insert shot of an arm coming in or something. We have nice bearings so we can have easy movement in the waist, and the head has a ball and socket joint so we can get all kind of movement out of this. This one's mostly epoxy and some urethane parts. Our stunt one over here, which the guys are hard at work on, has to be a little more pliable. This one's foam, it's a 280 foam. It still has the aluminum armature, so we still get the same articulation out of all the joints. It just doesn't have the rigidity of the Hero one. So if it falls out of the truck, which it's going to do in the film, it's not going to shatter.
And door!
Basically what we're doing is the rest of the crew here is catching this one up to the same level as this. So when they're done, you won't be able to tell them apart.
Then we're doing an old 1984 Arnold recreation of him.
This was all sculpted traditionally the same way in clay, the whole body. It took me about 4 weeks to do. I got as much reference of Arnold as I could, and I sculpted it over a scan of Arnold from, I think, 2002, 2003. So he was in his 50s, so I took that, which gave me all the proportions of Arnold. And then from photo reference, I had to go back in and bulk him back up as he was in 1983. After, I think, he had just finished his last Mr. Olympian, so he was pretty buff at that point. So It was going back in, making all the proportions, all the muscles there, but then going in and mapping all the veins in and making sure it's as accurate as we could make it. This is a sculpture done that we actually did from Terminator 4 that we reworked for this new one. This was Arnold back in 1984. This is based on old life casts that we had and photographs and stuff. And then this is a life cast of Arnold that was taken a few months ago at age 67. So I think he's 38 here and 67 here. It's soft silicone to a certain degree, and then it's rigid foam inside. And then in the stomach, it's deeper, so it can flex and move, and everything can move around naturally. Like we have the neck, and on the day when this is like when it's dead Terminator, we'll pose this in whatever pose we want, and we can lock it off. It took us about 2-3 days to put the endoskeleton inside the head and the chest wounds and all the different various wounds, and then all the hair. The wig is all hand-tied from here back on lace, and then the whole front edge, as you can see, is all punched in one hair at a time. See how fine that is? And then styled and cut. And then all the eyebrows are punched, and the eyelashes are punched and curled as well. I did the whole body, and then the legs are based off the same mold. So I think we're doing 12 pair of legs that are gonna have a frozen look, and they're gonna be hanging in the factory.
I'm working on Terminator legs here, and we're casting them out of Platsil Gel 10, which is a platinum silicone, non-toxic, and it has been tinted to look like skin. It's a 2-part silicone that when added together, you'll have a pot life or a working time of about 5 minutes, and it has a very flesh-like feel to it, which makes it perfect for using for legs.
You brush them in a layer at a time, and then you build it up to the point where you can put the steel armature in so that it can move, and then you backfill that with a foam so that it's got a nice squishy natural feel to it. We can do about 1 a day. It takes about probably 6 hours maybe. When the piece comes out of the mold, it obviously has a seam line on it, and our job is just to erase that so it doesn't look fake. The hardest thing to pull is obviously the human eye. If there's a few little dotted line of a seam, the mind actually fills it in. You always see the line, so you really got to work hard to confuse it and hide it. We're just mixing up some material and putting it over the edge and smoothing it out. And then once we've done that, then we go back over and try and match the texture that the sculptors have done.
So what's going on right now is we need to make a stunt mask that looks like Arnold. So we scanned Arnold some time ago, we've cleaned up that scan, and now we've prepped the geometry to be 3D printed. I can open up the hood to give a little bit more insight. So it's printing right now face down at a 16 micron level, which is smaller than one of my piece of hairs. With every layer that goes back and forth, that's one of the layers of the geometry building it up. And as it goes on, those lights cure it to bring it to a hard state. And then once it gets 3D printed, it'll be handed over to a makeup artist / sculptor to bring out even more detail in it. In this scenario, Arnold's gonna take about 29 hours to print his full face. So we have just about 29 hours left. It pretty much just started. So tomorrow afternoon, we'll have Arnold in our hands.
And we're also doing lots of prosthetic appliances. This is a big part of the Terminator movies, always have been.
So here we have a map to what the makeup is eventually going to be like. There's 5 different stages to the Arnold makeup. In each new stage, there's anywhere between 3 and 6 new appliances added. So he starts out with the basic Arnold Guardian. Then he'll get a couple of new scars. Then we go to phase B, new scars being added. Stage C, looks like there's 9 more scars being added, all the way up to the point where he becomes the really disfigured Terminator. This is a glue that we glue appliances on the face with, and what we're doing here is we're making a self-sticking appliance. We're taking this liquefied glue and turning it in front of a little bit of heat and air for hours and creaming it to almost like a peanut butter paste. We figured out with our acrylic colors and some flocking the proper color to match to Arnold Schwarzenegger's skin tone. So once this is a nice thick peanut butter, We'll take this and put it into molds that we have outside that I'll show you now. So what Ken's doing here is he's just spatulating the prostate into the mold, making sure there's no air bubbles, getting all the detail captured. And once the prostate's in there, a nice even level, he's going to take the acetate plastic, he's burping out all the airs, and he's going to create a blend edge that'll blend down to Arnold's face. Now the next step is this is going to have to go in the freezer for about an hour and chill. As you can see here, we have dozens of pieces that are in the works. This one's ready to come out. So once these are frozen nice and solid, we carefully peel the mold off. And here's the appliance. But it'll never really go translucent, so what we have to do is we take this appliance, we put it into a convection oven or dehydrator for days. Then once it comes out of the oven, it'll go into our box and it'll get shipped to set for application.
When I look back to what, we did back then with a small group of people, it's a classic film. But, technically, you keep getting better and the bar keeps getting raised. And so the standards keep going up. And, it's very photoreal now, the way the appliances are being done. And then what's genius about it now, what we couldn't do back then, was the blending of the CG with the prosthetics. With prosthetic appliances, you can only build up onto the skin, you can't take away. So what's fantastic, and we did this actually back on T3 for the first time, was, removing from the actor, which you can do, utilizing the combination of CG and the appliances. So it's, bringing to bear all the state-of-the-art tricks of the trade to, make this movie really special.
The thing that was so exciting for me at the beginning of Terminator was that I got to recreate 1984. So I knew when I spoke with Alan, our director, that I needed to match that opening shot of Griffith Park Observatory. I started with the punks. I called everybody. I was looking for those costumes. I even called Arnold Schwarzenegger and said to him, "Do you have those costumes? Who has the costumes?" And the thing is, when they did the very first Terminator, they didn't know when they were shooting it that they had something that was going to become a monumental success and kind of a part of the history of sci-fi film. So it turns out that nobody had these costumes. Probably someone's wearing it today and doesn't even know that it was in Terminator.
Your clothes, give them to me, now. You won't be needing any clothes.
So it was very important to Alan and myself that when Arnold walks up behind the naked young T-800 Terminator, that you didn't know in the first couple seconds who it was walking up behind him. The thing that Alan insisted upon from the very beginning was that he said, "I want a hood on Arnold." And the question was, how can you have Arnold playing the Terminator not wearing leather in the opening shot? So I tried hoods with leather, hoods that were fabric, and eventually we settled on a combination between a custom-made leather jacket from Matchless in England, and I worked together with them to have these jackets built, integrating a hood so that Arnold could walk up. You wouldn't know who it was. You would just see this massive, imposing figure, and then he could drop the hood. Kind of pleases both camps, the hood, the leather, Terminator.
I've been waiting for you.
We adore Susan.
Yeah.
We did Jack Reacher with her prior, and one of my favorite moments on Reacher was literally when she was doing research by literally sitting in bars trying to figure out in Pittsburgh, how these people would dress and what kind of jacket Reacher would wear. And I mean, when you say dedicated, you will never find a human being more dedicated to perfection than Susan Matheson.
I believe she cut 70 versions of the jacket that Tom ultimately wore in Jack Reacher. And she didn't do quite as many for Arnold's jackets in this film, but she did a lot.
Anyone who's watched T1 knows that Kyle Reese arrives naked in an alley, steals the pants off a homeless guy. He goes running down an alley, runs into a discount department store, and what does he find there? He finds a military trench and a pair of Nike Vandal sneakers. Because we were going back to 1984, I knew, even though it was an alternate version of 1984, that Kyle Reese had to find these exact items.
There's a kind of iconic shot that the fans will recognize when Kyle Reese puts the shoe on in 1984, and I really wanted to get that exact frame. Susan was being sort of rebuffed for a while by Nike, and finally she just steamrolled them. And as a result, we have the very shoe being recreated by Nike for us.
They are an exact replica, down to the color and the Velcro straps.
One of the most important things about landing the role for me was, well, once I found out that it was mine, I was on the phone to the wardrobe department immediately to find out if we were bringing back the Nike Vandals, and was told we were, and yeah, I was in. That's when I signed.
We were recreating the jacket, and two of the people in my department went thrift store shopping, and they walked in and they found the exact jacket from the original Terminator, because it turns out that the jacket that Kyle Reese wore was actually a trench coat from the military that was very popular in the 80s. And the people used to wear them with their Doc Martens and their jeans and the trench coat. It was something that was very common in the 80s, but it's now very, very difficult to find. So once we realized that it was an existing military jacket, the hunt was on to try to find these jackets everywhere.
You think he's dead, don't you?
Sarah Connor in Terminator Genesis is a completely different Sarah Connor. We're back in 1984, but this is not the same Sarah Connor that Linda Hamilton was in 1984. So it's a complete paradigm shift for me in terms of design for Sarah Connor. Because when we meet her, she is battle ready. She already knows the exact date and time that Kyle Reese is going to appear. So I started to look at what was iconic in 1984 for a tough chick who's ready for battle. We were steeped in punk rock culture at the time. Almost every woman who was interested in punk rock culture had a leather biker jacket, almost like Arnold in T1. And so I thought this would be a great way of kind of connecting these characters and these movies by putting her in a leather biker jacket. And of course, what did women wear at the time on their feet if they were steeped in kind of wanting to be feminine but tough and part of the punk rock culture? Well, they wore Doc Martens. So in 1984, she's wearing a leather jacket, she's wearing cargo pants and some Doc Martens, and she's ready to kick ass. One of the challenges with Arnold in Terminator Genesis is that every costume he wears needs to be iconic, but there's such a different place that this character is coming from. The surprise is that there's actually 4 changes in this movie for Arnold in terms of clothing. And we see him in 84, we see him in the 70s, then we see him twice in San Francisco in 2 different looks. When we first meet him in San Francisco, we meet him at the hospital. And it was so important that what he wore when he walked into the hospital, that he looked like someone visiting a patient at the hospital so that he would not arouse suspicion. He's wearing kind of an olive drab jacket and some jeans and construction worker boots. And so he almost looks like, you know, maybe he's been doing construction for the last 33 years.
Go try the nurse's.
You know, for me, it's painful going anywhere other than his classic leather look, but it was so important to the storyline that he not give away that he was a Terminator. And then we have an opportunity later on in the Battery Tunnels where he then changes into tactical fighter gear and he becomes that Terminator character again. He was a great collaborator because every time I would start going here, Arnold would say, no, you need to go here. And the greatest thing about fitting Arnold was when I first met him, I was thinking, well, you know, he's a little older than he was in the 80s. What are we going to do about his look and, you know, how to make him look formidable? Well, about a month later, I had another fitting with Arnold, and I walk in, and he says to me, I have the same measurements now as 1984. He had completely transformed himself in a month. And I said to him, have you been working out? And he looked at me and he said, no. Because the thing about Arnold is he's a great joker. And that's the thing I've discovered about him. He will, as they say, really take the piss out of you. One of the most exciting aspects of getting asked to design Terminator Genesis was the future war. Knowing that I would have this entire world that I could create from nothing. One of the places that I started with was, okay, we're looking at Los Angeles culture from the 90s and what would have happened before an apocalypse. And then I started looking at all guerrilla fighters in the world today. And what do guerrilla fighters wear when they're fighting? You wear what you can find, and you use it in a way that works for you. So for example, I've got arm pieces that are California license plates. We took tires and repurposed them into arm pieces and shoulder pieces. He's got an interesting, very blocky shield. Come look at this one.
That's awesome.
He's got some paintball, actually he's got motocross armor on. And we made all of these pieces. So it's a really interesting group of guerrilla fighters because you've got 350 people that essentially every single person is dressed differently.
On this day, we take back our planet!
Then we have the John Connors and the Kyle Reeses of that world. They are the elite officers. And so what's happened is you think if a community is at war, well, you're going to take the most highly functional things and you're going to put energy into that and supporting the elite fighters and give them the cargo pants and the things that you found that might be the most highly functional. So what we did was, together with Diana Burton and Props, we built chest pieces that were good for plasma rifle hits. And then we built a lot of other pieces, you know, shoulder pieces, elbow pieces, knee pieces. And then based on the kind of fighting that they're doing and then the weapons that they have, their outfits modify according to that. This one is actually John Connor. You can see his initials, JC, on it. He has this kind of very futuristic looking protective shoulder piece. There's a secret that I'm gonna let you in on, which is that my crew discovered car mats. If you start cutting up your car mats, you'll land up with some great armor that works really well for camera. And if you can see the back of it, you know, it's been cut up and then riveted together, and the rivets have been aged and made rusty. This is also a car mat that had a piece of metal in it, but when you patina it, sand it, put it through the cement mixer. If you look up close here, you can really see what a cement mixer does, because the rubber has gotten patinaed in the crevices and there's like a white dust, and it really starts to look like it's gone through a post-apocalyptic nuclear war.
Especially in this movie, function was really important. You know, each and every one of them to their own extent is a soldier. And then you have Arnold, who's a machine. And so, yes, you want them to look good, to say the least, but anything they wear, they're going to wear for a reason. And that was something Susan latched onto, you know, within moments of saying, yes, I desperately want to do this movie because I love science fiction and I want to do a big science fiction film. And she just blends that beautifully. Beauty and functionality. And we were thrilled with the results. And so was Arnold, and he's none too easy to please.
One of the things we're staying very true to is the practical action that we have in this movie is massive. We have a Golden Gate Bridge chase sequence that took 15 days to shoot. We have a gigantic future war in this movie. The third act fight with John and Guardian at the end is massive. So the scope and scale of this truly is as big as anything we've ever made.
You're dealing with robots and you're dealing with, flying HK drones and spider tanks. So you're going to get CG, but I do think there's also an expectation of practical stunt work. And this movie truly is a blend of both.
Terminator in particular has this kind of scale of combat which is specific, I think. There's a way in which Arnold, as the T-800 fights, it's big and broad and heavy, and Arnold himself said, it's Terminator, you have to go big.
He knows better than anybody how to move, so I had the doubles matching what he's doing and keeping that theme of what he's always had.
And we cut.
And so we haven't changed that in any way. He's getting up there in age, he's still at it. He just still wants to do whatever he can. He's done quite a bit on this.
3, 2, 1, go!
Pops!
A lot of people ask me always the question, says, okay, so this is a different Terminator movie, this is a different script, it's a different story, it's a different director, different producers, everything is different. I mean, what was different in the way you had to prep for this movie? And, especially now that you are, 67 years old versus, 35 years old or 40 years old, I mean, there must be a difference. And the fact of the matter is that I have really kept in shape all the time. I train every day, I lift weights every day, I do my bicycle riding, my cardiovascular training and all this. And for a movie like that, inevitably you have to gain some weight because this is what the character was, the way it was written. The flesh and the look and the hair and all this kind of changes over the years, but not the skeleton. The metal skeleton is still the same frame, so you have to have the same size. So I had to have the same body weight again as I did with the original one, which was around 228, 230 pounds. So I gained that weight back, trained harder, and lifted more weights, heavier weights and so on. And so we went through that kind of a training, and then working with the stunt coordinators and with the stunt people to do the actual training for the stunts and choreographing of the stunts, because there were tremendous, fight scenes.
Action.
Amelia, I already knew she was a tough cookie. I've been in the wilds of Malta with her standing naked surrounded by dragons, so I know how tough she can be. But I think, her of all people had the biggest challenge.
I think Emilia Clarke has really had her hands full, because anyone that takes on a role like that and has to live up to the kind of standard of a Linda Hamilton, this is a tough act to follow. And she dove into this whole thing, and she did the weight training, and she got a trainer for martial arts, and she got a trainer for the bodybuilding and the fitness training, and then worked with the stunt guys. So she really went all out.
And coming up.
She's game for anything. She was happy to come into the stunt stage and kind of, was always excited to do more and more and more.
They had me preparing for this for a while, to not only get into sort of physically understanding what was needed for the role. For Sarah as a character, she was brought up by a Terminator to be a warrior, so she's got a huge body of knowledge when it comes to survival and fighting. So there was a lot of stuff that was kind of needed just to feel comfortable embodying that within and kind of walking with Sarah and always being prepared.
Come with me if you want to live.
I think that Jai Courtney was a perfect pick because he was like a strong guy. He has played this kind of roles before, very athletic, and he got really pumped up. He was terrific with the fight scenes and with all the action sequences. And and he's at that age where He just loved doing all the action.
Jai was already able to do anything they threw at him. I mean, he was ridiculously
Jai could
fit.
play a machine. I mean, he's
so
relentless,
strong.
and then some of the horrible things that were done to him
And hanging
during the
upside down
show,
and throwing and
I mean, I think he had the worst of it because he was the most capable. They realized he was the one that, well, just hang him, don't hang anybody else.
He'll be fine.
We'll put him in the harness. We'll
Yeah.
make it so he's the one.
Yeah.
Ready, and 3, 2, 1, action!
And honestly, you want this to feel like a football player just sacks somebody. I mean, like, the impact needs to be violent and aggressive. This just feels really, really soft.
There are empty ones. You control the energy by putting a steel plate on it, and it forces all the explosion to come back with it, and it breaks the glass. It makes the temper just go crazy.
Be better. We're also going to go to 100 mil or 75 instead of a 50, so it's less. They compress it some more.
Yeah. And then she's a little closer. I mean, if you don't mind that.
Yeah.
Okay.
B-Mark.
Smug it up, Dave. All right, run away.
Here we go. And 3, 2, 1, action!
Billy, Mike, you good?
No, that's great. Are you okay though? You got some. Oh, that's good. I've got some of this.
It's good.
Yeah.
It was good, yeah.
You got her good.
Yeah.
Alan Taylor is such an expert with action because he has done those kind of movies before, so he knew exactly what he was doing, and it was really great to feel like protected by him because he knew how to work with the visual effects people, the special effects people, the stunt coordinators, and the camera crew, and everyone, how to mold it all together and create this synergy so that you can create great scenes and then make it all work.
Yeah, the farthest you can extend it, the better. Maybe even 2 hands. Right.
Ready, and action.
Zero, go!
Here we go. Ready, and action. Let's hold it then. Ready, and action.
Well, there's guns. I'm not sure if I mentioned the guns, but I'm going to mention them now. There's firing guns, which is cool.
Amelia Clark and Jai Courtney had to go through a lot of training to, work with those weapons. And for Arnold, it's just like, second nature. I think no gun was big enough. We had an armorer named Harry Lou, who was kind of a genius of weaponry that kind of kept everybody, in check.
The important thing in the Terminator movie is always that you have a long range of kind of weapons, a wide variety of different weapons.
Well, this is the Guardian's munitions bunker. This is where he's been stockpiling weapons for several decades.
I think there were probably more guns on that set than on many military bases.
This set has probably 500 weapons, I would say, right?
Yeah, between rubbers and replicas and real and collectible
period pieces.
And also some of the guns from the other movies that we were trying to incorporate into this set in particular when the camera panned and we saw this.
The M79.
The M79, and we've got the minigun here.
Yeah.
When I first started, I met Harry out in California with the director and the producers, and we went through the script and we discussed all the weapons. And ultimately, we wanted to introduce some new weapons, clearly, because that's a very important part of the story.
The problem we had early on is that the vision what the future weapons are.
If the machines are designing weapons, they don't care about design, really. They care about function. So we had to sort of become machines ourselves when we were thinking about what kind of guns that they would create. This could be maybe my favorite one. This one was the original leaf blower. This is a plasma gun that was created by the future, the endoskeletons. Happy with the weight of it. It weighs about 30 pounds. This gun was used by Kyle Reese in the Future War. Also, this is based on an AK-47 technology, so it fired beautifully, and we designed it based on that gun because of the reliability of it. And again, you know, we've got our plasma tech down here, and in theory, the guerrillas made these based on things that they could find. But we also wanted to bring with us some of the history of the franchise, and we would keep true to the guns that the Guardian has used in the past. And typically, the guns that he likes to use are
the shotguns. The Guardian's shotguns are separated by the era. So in the 80s, his shotgun is a Remington 1100, and that is proper for the period. It's functional and it is slick. And I have to say, you know, with a lot of input from Arnold, and that he loved it, and we shot it, and we shot a lot of that, and without any single malfunction. And for the 2017 segment,
motorcycle.
Shit! We have a M3 Benelli and also an M4 Benelli, and both are also beautiful shotguns, and they're representing the high-tech part of the product. And once again, not a single jam, okay?
Hold on the gun, please, Harry. Let's roll, camera.
Safety is off.
112 Georgie, take 1, A and B.
Hey. Action!
The key thing is as you shoot, and it makes this bang, this loud noise, then you don't blink, because machines don't blink, right? So therefore you have to really be trained, and you have to do it over and over again. So it's all through reps that eventually the brain understands that not to flinch when you shoot. So I was able to master that after, again, training it very hard and practicing a lot.
For Sarah Connor, she is a much different character in this movie. And the first gun that we see her with is a .50 caliber Barrett. Again, it's proper for 1984. And this weapon posed a few problems for us because it had to serve two different purposes. It had to be a sniper rifle that could take down a Terminator from far away, and also blow off the back of a armored truck door at fairly close range.
The length of the barrel, oh my goodness. We talk and we brainstorm, and you know, what can we maneuver inside the vehicle?
What can we maneuver inside a Brinks truck, which you'd think is big? It is not that big, so this was what we chose, and it worked out very, very well.
Lots of guns, and then some more guns, and then a few more guns thrown in. I didn't know anything about guns, and now I do. I know a lot about guns. For a clumsy 5'0" Brit, I'm loving it. Yeah.
Sometimes, Mom, you can be a real bitch. Now, Sarah! Run!
I'm now dangerous. It's f***ing awesome.
And we cut. Check it.
So many people who came onto this movie came on because of their love of this franchise and wanted to, as they would all say, wanted to do it justice. And that absolutely traveled through post. Roger Barton is someone that we've worked with before and we will work with over and over and over again.
Our editor, Roger Barton, is amazing at what he does. He's come out of years and years in the Michael Bay School when it comes to sort of the weaving the story together and keeping the ball rolling. He's amazing. I've been learning a lot from him. We have areas where I feel like I know what I'm doing, but there's areas where I'm really grateful that he knows what he's doing.
I mean, it does feel to me like where they're transitioning is too late. I mean, if we're saying this haze over the lens is outside, and you see how it goes clear, right?
Yeah, yeah.
That's way too late.
That's
right?
way too late, yeah.
He's just such a pro, and he's got a team that comes with him that, you know, it's not just one man in this kind of movie. It's, you know, a whole army of people that are handling post for us, and they're doing a great job. There's urgency of getting them out, and I feel like we're going to come back and spend a lot of time with them doing that.
No, I agree. I feel.
Sarah! It's the only way.
That works for me.
Yeah.
Apparently.
I thought you could go even shorter, but let's just watch it.
Those are pretty much what they are. I mean,
Yeah. That seems like the right.
Yeah, it seems right. I mean, you're like,
Okay, good.
Credit to everybody who worked on this movie, you know, from Alan to Roger to Yannick to Sherry, everybody who worked on this film in post. Best idea won. You know, there really wasn't any ego brought to it. It really was about what is best for the movie. And whoever came up with that idea, it was like, great, okay, now how do we riff off of that? And yes, we all spent enough time in dark rooms with one another that it was just like, we're just gonna have a good time with this. It's taking up our lives, so we might as well just have a good time with this.
Terminator Genesis was very challenging from a visual effects point of view.
One of the things that, as a huge fan of Terminator, and one of the things we knew that the fans really wanted, I mean, if you read any online commentaries, that people want to see the fully rendered future war. And so obviously our movie opens up on the day that John Connor leads humanity basically to success against the machines. And it is the biggest future war sequence that has been in a Terminator movie to date.
The future war, the war camp war, was for most parts really sort of initiated with like a lot of concept work. We received basically these sort of plates from the principal photography, and it sort of, you know, came with the premises of extending it and making it sort of this post-apocalyptic environment. And the more we got involved in the sequence and the more we started working on it, the more it became clear that the premises was like, you know, the more the better, where, you know, almost nothing could fit into the image anymore, you know? So it was about like making it as epic and as big as humanly possible.
The HKs and the T-800s are obviously canon from the first two movies. They were kind of updated and redesigned by our incredible visual effects team, which is really led by, you know, Yannick Surs and Sherry Hansen. They were the spider tanks, which were a new design, obviously, that Jim had actually developed very, very early on, but they were never actually able to bring them to fruition. It was really fun getting to actually sit, you know, obviously in post for many, many months with the VFX team, obviously helping to develop and create these shots.
Yannick Surs, he's our visual effects supervisor, and he's probably got more experience at these movies than any of us, so we're all a little bit intimidated by him. He sort of keeps us on our toes. Frequently, he pushes back when we suggest things, and he's found solutions for things that we didn't find. And just the bar he sets for the finished visual effects is very, very high.
What excited me about this Terminator movie was probably the prospect of the recreation of the young Arnold character.
You know, Yannick Sers, who's our visual effects supervisor, and Sherry Hansen, who's our visual effects producer, probably the first thing they ever said to us after they read the script was, the John Connor design is going to be challenging, but the young Arnold in Griffith Park, you're not going to get that until you rip it out of our hands the very last minute when this movie is locked.
It is already difficult enough, I guess, to create a human being digitally. It becomes even more difficult if that human being is like such an iconic figure as Arnold Schwarzenegger. Right from the start, we couldn't leave any stone unturned. So our whole process, how we did digital characters in the past, had to be evaluated and changed or invent new technologies wherever possible to just raise the bar. The observatory sequence of the Griffith Park sequence that we worked on sort of, you know, splits almost into two portions, into two halves. Like the first portion being basically the recreation of the original movie scenes, you know, of the arrival from the young Arnold. We're basically introducing that young Arnold character traveling back in time. Then the second half and the second part is basically where the storyline deviates a little bit, and that's when young Arnold is basically finding himself, like, you know, being exposed or to an opponent which is basically himself, just at an older age, and that's from there on effectively where we have this sort of face-off between young versus old.
I've been waiting for you.
First, we built the set in New Orleans and shot it practically. Arnold obviously plays the Guardian, but there's the entire process of youthifying, obviously, Guardian to turn our 67-year-old Arnold Schwarzenegger into a 50-year-old version of himself. Then we actually scoured the earth to find basically a bodybuilder by the name of Brett, who basically is the only human being on the planet who is almost as big as Arnold was when he was Mr. Universe.
It was all sort of choreographed with a stunt double. You sort of acted that out. But what happened throughout the process is we basically had to discard the plate almost entirely. We almost had to say, like, okay, you know, the lens isn't quite right to be, you know, correct enough and close enough to the original footage, and the framing isn't quite right. So we decided basically to go almost full CG.
The first process is you build the model, which gets you very, very close to where you want to be. But then at the end of it, you get into this uncanny area when you're looking at it to where you're 5% off, things will look right, but it's that glint behind the eyes, it's the way the light interacts with your skin, all of this incredibly finite detail that separates from something that feels actually alive and living and something that just feels dead. Well, the sculpt of his cheekbones feel a little bit better. His face feels just a little bit wider. And I think if we take that down, and so we really feel like, I think it'll accentuate the cheek line more, make the jawline more defined, which is so Arnold.
The review process with our clients started off, you know, at the beginning mostly with us working together with Yannick, basically. And we sort of had regular review sessions with him 2 or 3 times a week where we went through the processes and the steps. With a character like the young Arnold, it was something that, you know, took pretty much, you know, our entire time from the start of the show when we first started working on this project all the way to the end, where we literally continuously built and refined this young Arnold character. Then further down the line, when it came more to the shot production, we started, you know, being more and more exposed to the filmmakers like Alan Taylor, on David Ellison, and Dana Goldberg. It was a highly creative process, but also a very time-consuming process for us to, you know, study and research like what Arnold, it was like back then, effectively.
Nice night for a walk.
Wash day tomorrow. Nothing clean, right?
Nothing clean, right.
You know, Terminator movies have a history of phenomenal practical effects and groundbreaking visual effects.
Cameron, when he makes movies, always pushes the envelope on what's possible, and on T2, he did it in a big way that really had a sort of pride of place in the movie. The T-1000 technology seemed impossible at the time. I remember seeing it, and I think we all, you know, thought, how do you do that?
Well, Terminator 2 was made at really the dawn of the CG character age. We made a whole movie in 1990, it was released in the summer of '91, that had a fluid metallic character as the bad guy. So we were betting the farm on this new technique, and it kind of just blew up. 2.5 decades later, it's an extremely mature art form.
Well, the T-1000, we wanted to explore about how we could take it any further with the breaking down and the transformation of the form.
We did a whole bunch of different fancy fluid sims and all the rest of it. But they actually, if anything, the more complex we got, the further away we got from the original material. Weirdly enough, we went completely full circle back to almost doing it in a similar fashion to how they did it on T2, to actually obtain that similar sort of look. So for example, the shot where he comes through the window in the police car is all just a series of sculpts. Equally, when he melts in the acid bath, that is all pure fluid sim.
We had some fantastic performance from Byung for the T1000, and we really wanted to get the essence of his acting across, even though parts of him were going to be fully CG. To tackle that, we really developed a pipeline that allowed us to work iteratively in effects very quickly to dial in more of his performance or dial it more towards effects for dramatic effect, specifically in the acid bath sequence of him being eroded away.
It's very hard to surprise people. So, you know, the challenge on this film was, yes, we're going to see Terminator endoskeletons, and we're going to see a lot of other CG effects that you might not think too much about. But in the center of it all is this new bad guy. And he can't just be the same simple liquid metal dude that we saw, you know, a couple decades ago. So they've gone to a much higher level.
I think we kept pushing ourselves to try and find a vocabulary for that villain and the imagery that would be almost as challenging. Cameron's T1000 was a beautiful creature that was absolutely simple, and we have a beautiful creature that is absolutely complex, and so we're sort of embracing complexity in our T3000.
D-Neg did an unbelievable job on this movie and really delivered in every single way with the design of John Connor, who is a man-machine hybrid whose body has actually been infected on a cellular level.
You know, you have to think about the lineage behind it all. You know, from the T800, the T1000, what would be the next design, being as it's Skynet that's designed this thing. So he is, at the start, they're just replicating him. So it's a nanosite humanoid thing.
That hurt.
We start to develop this from last year, basically from how he looks like, from the concept to modeling, the shader. We went through a lot of development until roughly last December. It's kind of confirmed.
The fact that Cyberdyne had come up with a way of replacing and improving on the human body with these intelligent particles, who was never in a stable state. He was constantly being reinvented, and the analogy we came up with was as if he was being 3D printed.
My mission was to literally build this like superhuman, but with all this design in it. We started like some kind of two branch of it, like one would be like fully nanotech kind of organic fields, and one would be like more close to T800's Skynet fields. Ultimately, this would be like the containers and the guides for all the nanomachine effects, which would be on top of this.
Our job kind of started once the design was sort of settled. So our job was to actually make him look like he's made out of a million little nanobots or something, some sort of nanotech that's kind of making up the whole idea of John Connor. Traditional animation, you would just animate each point, but it gets really tricky for like a million nanopoints. So we came up with algorithms and we invented all those really advanced techniques, but once it was all set up, it was the machine doing the work for us, because you're never going to get away with like animating millions of points for like 1,000 shots.
Crank it!
They can't kill John Connor, you know, so then they need to control John Connor. So the T2000 in that sense is not a, you know, it's not a straight robot. It is partly John. It's very important to us that you saw that Jason's features, his performance was still there. What we thought was cool with this is he controls his own magnetic fields, right? That's how his form is actually generated. The reason that we have the MRI scene is to actually see that he is susceptible to something. So yes, he's slowly being pulled apart in layers on that particular shot, and you can see the various different organs in there. So that's obviously after that he's designed a little bit more all the way through the film to the point where you see him in the fight at the end. He's a much more streamlined and ripped version of that.
There's that technique, it's called phasing. It's when the T3000 goes through the Terminator and shreds his cloth and all his skin. Obviously, that's something we've never seen before, and it's really hard to imagine because it's such an advance and it's really complicated and complex to describe. Obviously, we need to show like different versions and different ideas and go through like a lot of iterations.
The phasing was one kind of trademark moment within that sequence where he's supposed to kind of separate and then reform around Guardian, go through him, create a lot of damage. And basically, Jason Clarke turns into his T-3000 form.
Obviously, you need to get the animation right. It needs to look like two guys are actually fighting. So we had like this really advanced motion capture technology, which kind of fed into the animation, which then fed into the nanification process. And that bring all that pretty much from CG onto the screen to like a photoreal composite. That was a tough challenge.
That is one of the last shots that they finished on the movie, and in that shot, John Connor, T-1000 is entirely CG. Arnold Schwarzenegger in Guardian is entirely CG, and the environment that they take place in is 90% CG. And literally it looks photorealistic and perfect, and the work they have done on this movie is truly, truly groundbreaking.
What are you? I'm Skynet.
The T-5000 was, it went through a few looks before we finally settled on what you will see in the finished film. But I guess the general concept behind it was a projection, but it was obviously a projection that eventually grew and became a physical object. So in this case, we went by the whole belief that this laser would ionize the air and actually create particles from elements that were already there, but they were just almost solidifying them. So as he grew, he became more and more of a physical creature.
So it starts as a child, it grows all the way through to be Matt Smith and the T-5000. So we wanted that as some kind of design ethic to show evolution, complexity, and rapid growth. There was a lot of ideas about what the T-5000 should be. I mean, what is pure Skynet?
Phosphorescence is really the element that we looked at because we wanted kind of the air particles to ionize on, and not the hologram you've seen 1,000 times, but for it to be something different with technology you hadn't seen before. You know, if you go night diving, you shut off all your lights and you wave your hand underwater, you'll get these kind of green phosphorescence that will glow and kind of ionize on, ionize off. And that was really the concept behind how to create really the T-5000 in Matt Smith.
In addition to sort of all of the beauty aspects of what they were creating, they also then had to really fit into a very logical box. How much of the face do we want to see? How much of the body do we really want to see? We needed him to be immediately recognizable. When Jai looks at him and says, that's the thing that attacked John.
That's the thing that attacked John. I didn't attack John. I saved him.
We needed to really understand that he had the ability to do that.
The Golden Gate is obviously a chase sequence and progresses, and the environment changes all the way through. So in terms of there isn't one set determined background and environment, and so dealing with that evolution and change in plate photography, studio photography, 3D elements we're putting in there to make that blend together is quite a tricky thing.
They built a 500-foot section in New Orleans near the production offices of the Golden Gate Bridge, so which we scanned and photoed and all the rest of it. And then we had a whole bunch of different cars and stanties and rehearsed sequences on that backlot, and of course the bus flip.
We tried to retain as much plate as we could. So in a lot of those shots, we are using the real bus, but what we're doing is we're augmenting it and we're using 3D for cleanup. So the underside of the bus, all of the chassis was all rigged with hydraulics to actually make it flip. And we had to get rid of all of that. We started work on that quite a long time ago, because I think it was in the first
It was in a trailer.
trailer.
It was in trailer,
Yes,
yeah.
the early
So
trailers.
yeah.
So that work on that started an awful long time ago.
It was great because we heard Arnold really liked the sequence. We did our normal cine syncs, and then they said he's around and he wants to come and say thank you. So they set up a little special session, and hundreds of people piled into the screening room. But he had just seen the Golden Gate sequence and said he loved it. He just wanted to say thank you.
The helicopter sequence went through various different iterations for what it was. We had a particular sequence when we were originally shooting the stuff in San Francisco where it was going through various different bits of areas of San Francisco, and we covered them with scanning. We did basically a visual effects film camera as well for a lot of pan and tilt plates off of street level and rooftop stuff. But we basically covered ourselves for recreating most of San Francisco.
We had over 110 shots just for the helicopter chase from starting
from the rooftop and then going all the way down to San Francisco over the Bay Bridge, then up to the final crash at Cyberdyne. More or less every shot in this sequence is touched by us. So either it was an outside full CG shot, or where we had some practical elements, or then the interiors when Arnold, Sarah and Kyle are sitting in the helicopter. So all the environment you're seeing through the windows is touched by us. We try to get the spirit of a real action chase sequence with helicopters. We started to build then San Francisco in the computer and doing all the animation and working with the filmmakers together to find really the pace they wanted for the sequence.
What is that thing? Fate.
The first one you see is 2029, so it's very clinical, it's very industrial. There's nothing there, there's not really any lighting because it's robots using it. So and that's why we see obviously all the work lights in there when John and Kyle are in there later on. And it's generating something whereby it's a painful thing to actually do. So there's a huge amount of electrics required. The idea is it almost tries to create almost a small sun. But we kept the same palette as the original films, so the fans could understand that this is something that they could relate to as being the time displacement device. And that sort of design ethic is kept through, albeit in slightly different iterations in the other two devices as well. So 1984 is a little bit more of a scrappy version of it because it's a homemade version and created by the Guardian. So that one's a little bit more, shall we say, unstable. Then you're obviously taken up to 2017 where it's incomplete. So again, it's even more unstable.
The quantum field generator works? Yeah, that and nothing else.
The shape of the device, it was meant to be quite futuristic looking and it's meant to look quite pristine and clean. And in terms of for the lighting, we wanted to use quite a blue diffuse light, which was mostly coming from the displacement device. And that gave the overall ambience to the whole sequence and to the shots. And then when the rebels, they're all down inside and they have all their work lights set up. By using their work lights, we managed to get some nice pools of light, of warmer color, tungsten lights, which contrasted really nicely and actually helped sell the scale of the chamber room.
The feedback that I've been given or that I've received so far from the filmmakers or from Yannick or Sherry, it's been positive. And I think everyone on the production side was very happy, and I hope that they're all very, very pleased with the results.
Hopefully the guys, the audience, look at the T1000, the T3000 and still see that it harks back to the original material, albeit with a slightly different twist. It's a lot of work. A huge amount of people have worked a lot of time on this, and hopefully it shows.
Yay! All right, that's all, folks. Thank you very much for your time.
When I saw Terminator for the first time, it more than just blow me away, I just loved that world they created. So when David came along and said, would I just be part of the team? First of all, I felt really honored by that. Secondly, I love working with Lorne, and I've worked with Lorne for 12 years. I'm so not the composer on this. I'm just sort of part of the musical brain trust, as it were. It was just important to figure out how we could come back to the original movie in a timeless fashion.
I kind of came in quite late in the day, so I had about 2 days to write all the themes. One thing that I don't think that the other films had fully invested in was that guardianship, that close relationship. So I knew the strong guardianship theme, a John Connor theme, a Sarah and Kyle theme, because that is a new development that we haven't really experienced in the past, and a bigger picture, which was the whole arc of the film, which was fate and hope. I wasn't really expecting this deep storyline where musically there was going to be a big challenge. And I think right from day one, we all got together, David and Alan, and Dana and Hans and I and Roger, watched it, and the key thing about this movie, which I wasn't expecting, was the concept of hope and fate. Musically, that was the biggest challenge. And I think that right from day one, we always knew what the hardest emotional point was going to be. And it was going to be near the end with the sacrifice.
For that sacrifice cue at the end of the movie, I literally remember looking at Lauren and going, this is going to work if the music is brilliant. Otherwise, the scene is not going to work. And literally Lauren was like, oh, thank you for that pressure.
The performances were unique. We looked at certain things like John Connor because of the military factor. So I thought trumpet. But the main thing with the trumpet was because of John's development and his character was manipulating the trumpet. There's a whole sonic world to Terminator also. Yes, you've got the ba-dum, but there's got to be other kind of timbres around it that we can relate to. You see it gets louder because I'm stretching it. It should be... fade away, but because I've been stretching everything. But what I've been doing is doing octaves. I use your high and a low. And it, you know, it gets louder when I'm stretching. And I think we can just hold the for the Kyle and Sarah world. I have a great colleague called Peter Gregson, who's a cellist. And then I discovered that he played electric cello. And I kept hearing in my head this very simplistic idea of these da-da-da-da. And I got him to perform it. And then I manipulated it in audio by adding higher octaves that he can't even play. So that gave it their own sonic connection.
You know, when Hans and Lauren first came onto the film, he basically said, I want to play you the Sarah and Kyle love theme and the Guardian theme. Yeah. And me and Dana both looked at each other and we basically had tears in our eyes and we were like,
thank God.
Yes, and wow.
The hardest thing also was trying to figure out, get a sound of ba-da-bum, ba-dum. To me, when we use it, there's a point in using it. It's not just because we're wanting to put the old theme in it. It's the story of the Terminator. That's how I looked at it. I just keep smiling when I see a scene and I hear that theme in it. When Arnie just goes, I'll be back. Of course I want to hear ba-dum, bum, ba-dum.
I'll be back.
What?
Good.
Beautiful.
The concept of just before Sarah arrives near the beginning, I spent a lot of time there making music sound like sound. You know, because the thing is that we spent a long time with the concept of the T-1000 sound, and that was for 2 notes. And for like 4 seconds, that was probably one of the hardest things. Because it's something that, as soon as you hear it, you go, oh God, it's the T-1000. And you can't give it a melody. It's very hard to get this iconic sound. Because when you see the T-1000, it's a nod to the past.
the very first conversations that we had with Hans and Lauren is we need the emotion in this movie to really shine. Lita and Patrick have delivered it in terms of story, and Jai and Amelia and Arnold have delivered it in terms of their acting, but you really need the score to bring it all together and then just enhance it all. And then they did it.
We truly never say it's done. We always have another idea, or there's a little tweak you want to do, or you can just do it better. And you want to do it better. Because it's a Terminator movie.
I love writing. It's not work, it's a hobby. And you know that when it's 2 o'clock in the morning, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and David's still sitting here, listening to cues, they're living and breathing this. It's because this is actually a lot of fun.
We would sit with Lauren at night. We'd sit for hours, and it's just incredible dedication, and we are so thankful beyond words. It's been an incredible experience, this movie, from start to finish. You know, from literally the day that it was like, okay, we have the rights. Now what do we do? To, you know, now, which is waiting for sort of our child to walk out into the world and have everybody say whether or not they think she's beautiful, which we do.
I had no idea what to expect sitting down. I wasn't involved in the making of the film. So I'm in a dark theater, the movie starts, and I start to see things I recognize. Done with, you know, contemporary technology and all that, but things I recognize, like, okay, this is pretty cool. It's being very respectful of the first two films, and then all of a sudden it just swerves into completely new territory. And now I'm going on a journey. I'm just a fanboy at that point. You know, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, all right, this is pretty good. They better not screw this up. And I'm having this dialogue with myself throughout the film. You know, I'm thinking, okay, that's pretty good. Yeah, all right, that's good. Well, they really captured the sense of Reese and Sarah, and wow, this all makes a lot of sense. So I actually really enjoyed it.
This is all wrong, all right? John sent me here to save you.
From the Terminator that was sent back to kill me, I know, but we already took care of him.
We? Get down!
To me, these things are all about how do you let people sit in the theater and kick back and just be entertained and just be surprised and just really hold on to the seats and go through a roller coaster ride, just action-wise, but also an emotional roller coaster ride. One of the things that when I watched the film was that I remember most was the tremendous how touching it is. And they've done an extraordinary job with, you know, the way it was edited. I mean, it became really a touching movie, that the whole love story between Kyle Reese and Sarah Connor, but also the love between the protector and Sarah Connor. That is a meaningless gesture. Why hold on to someone when you know you must let them go?
It's kind of what I loved most. Selfishly, actress, just thinking about my part. But it is what I loved most about this script, is the relationship between Gaiden and Sarah Connor is just, it's the heart of it. It's beautiful. And you see Gaiden in this whole kind of other gorgeous light.
I have 2 daughters, and I get really excited about father-daughter relationships and how those play out. And we've watched the movie with audiences a little bit, just test audiences, and one of the strongest things that comes across is their relationship. And it's partly just there in the material. There's something really charming and intriguing about, you know, a strong young woman who's got a father figure and how they deal with each other, but also Amelia and Arnold clicked and had a wonderful rapport. I think you feel it.
He does seem sort of protective on set. It's sweet. It's really, he's just amazing. I mean, it's difficult to not just continually be in awe of him.
The plan is, if all goes unbelievably well, is that this will carry forward, and I do believe that the themes that it explores are infinitely explorable, and the characters we have are charismatic and interesting and fun and funny together, and so there's a world to explore there.
The thing that was really important to us in doing this was to actually craft it as a trilogy. To me, what are some of the greatest trilogies in the science fiction and fantasy space of all time are George Lucas's original Star Wars trilogy and the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And they both had one thing in common, which is they actually knew what the entirety of their stories were, and most of them had full scripts before they actually began shooting, which allowed you to not only talk about arcing over characters and stories over the course of one movie, but actually over the course of all three. And we have phenomenal writers in Lita Kalogridis and Patrick Lussier, and the three of us and Dana have spent an enormous amount of time in rooms actually breaking this thing. We actually have a Terminator room in our office, which is just surrounded entirely by whiteboards that has all three movies up on it. But it really allowed us to back into where we want to go.
One of the things we've discovered is, as we go forward from Genesis, it's very much like the character's face at the end of the movie. You know, there are still questions that need answers. Yep. There's a road that can go any direction. You're no longer shackled by what you think has to happen.
Sarah isn't.
Yeah, Sarah is
looking at an uncertain future, but in a very different way.
You need to understand that Skynet's gone. You're free. For the first time, you can choose the life you want. Any life you want.
What if I don't know?
I think that's something that maybe is inevitable to that character, that she is so strongly driven to change things. And then once you change things, you realize you're a little bit at sea in terms of what's going to happen next.
You're right. I can choose.
I can't say I have full scripts for 2 and 3, but I could say we've absolutely talked through the big sort of signposts of what happens in the next 2 films. And it's gonna be good. It's hard to go into more than that without giving away way too much, way too soon. But it absolutely has been envisioned as a trilogy, and we plan to close the loop at the end of the 3rd film.
Can I be objective? Can I guarantee that you'll enjoy it? No. I just know that I enjoyed the film, you know. But I strongly suspect that everybody will. If you liked the Terminator films, whether you're my age and you saw them in the movie theater, or whether you saw them on DVD or cable or whatever later, and it's just part of your childhood maybe, you're gonna love this movie.
I got into the film business because I was inspired by the movies that James Cameron made. Literally, when we set out to do this, the goal was to try to make something worthy of the universe that he created. And really, having gotten to spend a lot of time with Jim over this process, knowing that he believes that this movie deserves to exist in the universe that he imagined, means, you know, more to me than anything. And literally, and none of that would have been possible without the amazing, amazing team that we had making this movie.
I've worked on a lot of movies in my career, and I've never seen a crew come together and work as hard as they did on this film. And that's the thing that I'm going to take away from it.
I remember seeing the original Terminator movies growing up, high school and college, and they were just larger than life, you know, iconic pictures that I just never in a million years imagined that 25 years later I'd be shooting one of these.
This film is going to be a perfect combination of honoring and even revering the past incarnations of these characters and the universe that they're a part of.
Did you mate?
Oh, can you just not say the word mate to me again, like, ever?
It functions on what I think of as being sort of 2 levels, which are the levels that my favorite big movies do, which is that it roars along as an action movie and as a plot-driven movie, and, you know, with all the crescendos that it needs to have. But at the same time, I think what people will be most struck by is how much it keeps tying into the characters that we care about, get to know how they deal with each other, how they struggle with each other.
Please protect Sierra. You will see great action, mind-blowing special effects and fight scenes and car chase scenes, and you will see blow-ups and all of this, and you will see, I think, really great performances also. And so it will be overall a great way of getting entertainment.
We're biased. We love the movie. And we're also way too inside of it, but we absolutely love it. And, you know, in terms of our plans for the future, the future's not set, but boy, we've got big plans for it.
We would love nothing more than to be able to keep telling these stories.
The Golden Gate Bridge sequence is definitely one of the high points of the whole movie, and involved a tremendous amount of planning.
We knew we had a major action scene on the Golden Gate Bridge, and I love the fact that we were going to have them escape in a school bus. Just the imagery of the heroes running away in something as sort of defenseless and innocent as a school bus was great. A lot of contemporary action is done with CGI, and it's done very effectively. We have a helicopter chase which depends heavily on CGI, but for some crazy reason we took it into our heads to do this for real. You know, you do sense the difference. We wanted it to feel real for the audience, and so yes, we flipped a bus.
Obviously, we can't shoot on the Golden Gate, and most movies these days do it the same way. We build a portion, and then it becomes a CG piece by piece.
It's 500 feet of the Golden Gate Bridge in its entirety in terms of its surface and sidewalks and railings.
And 3, 2, 1, action.
Nice to see you. Get out.
There's literally 3 massive cannons that essentially fire these telephone poles down that essentially elevate the bus up into the air. 2, 1,
action! Alexander Witt, our second unit director, had a really good time flipping that bus. We did it twice, actually.
Yeah.
We didn't really think we had to do it twice, but it was like, well, we got the bus and we're all here, so let's do it twice.
They've done a spectacular job because I've really never seen a bus firsthand myself flipping that far into the air and then coming down and crashing down. It was like a spectacle to see something like that. And of course, they shot it with many, many cameras, so you will see many different angles when you watch the movie.
We shot a tremendous amount of first unit on the set, tremendous amount of second unit. We did aerial work at the real location. We shot some pieces on stage. We had a hanging bus sequence, upside down bus. I have no idea how many school buses we had, but we went through quite a few school buses.
It was amazing. We're hanging off the Golden Gate Bridge and desperately clinging on for dear life. Guardian comes in and saves the day, and then it's just the 3 of us hanging on for dear life as Kyle is kind of climbing up the bus seats as John's coming up to get him, and yeah, it's just, yeah, that's incredibly awesome.
It was a huge, huge undertaking. Definitely one of the bigger visual effects sequences of the whole movie. And you see it now and you totally feel like you're on the Golden Gate Bridge and this crazy event has happened. It's really exciting. It's really fun.
Let's go, get out.